Alright, in this video we are going to create some gauges. We can create them like half circles or whatever shape we want. And we can use this to gauge battery, CPU usage, RAM usage, cell phone, whatever. And the formula that we're going to use, we're going to use a couple more formulas, but to get the needle to move correctly, we basically want to take the current level. For example, if we take the current battery level divided by the max battery level, which would be 100, and if we multiply by the maximum number of degrees that we want this thing to rotate, because we might not want to go 360 degrees, but this is the formula we need to do to rotate the needle. Now the only downside to this is that it's the needle's going to jump if you do like CPU or RAM, because if you've monitored your CPU or RAM before, we all know that the CPU can jump from like 80% to 20, so it's going to go 80 and boom, right back to 20. And the way we can accomplish this, the only thing I'm not going to be able to do here, of course you could take each individual number, and I'm going to show you how to get these numbers. I'm going to give you a tutorial on series, a cool way to work this out. But the numbers are not going to be, every single one of them is not going to be nice and straight. And the only way I think you can accomplish that is to actually add each number individually. But nonetheless, I still think it's worth me showing you series to get this to work. And yeah, let's go ahead and have a look, and let's start off with the circular one, and let me give you a quick tutorial on series. So I'm going to add a series. By default it's what is it, 0 to 9, and it's showing like battery usage or whatever. I'm going to go ahead and go to custom, and I want to give you a quick tutorial on how this thing really works, the series that is. So let me go to style. Let's space them out a little bit more so we can see them. Of course I could have just went up to 20 straight up, but let's space them out a little bit more. Bam. Okay, there we go. And I want to go ahead, we can apply a circular thing to this as well, as you can see, but for now let's just talk about linear so we can clearly see these things. We got colors, foreground and background. I'm going to be using a clear background in a minute because sometimes I may want to hide whatever's not showing. See how this 80 and the 90 completely disappeared on me? Well, for now I'm cool with them still showing, so no big deal there. Alright, so back to series. How does this stuff work? First of all, let me take this thing here, let me take away current, and I'm going to start typing in some manual numbers. Let's start with 1. And here's how this formula works. Index represents the position that the number's in. Index always starts at 0. So this is a number. The first number in your list, I guess you could say, or in your series, its index is 0. Well, let's look at this formula. 0 times 10 is 0. This number here is in, its index is 1. 1 times 10 is 10. What about up here at 80? What is 80's index? Well, here's index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And if we take 8 times 10, we get 80. Let's play around with this formula a little bit before we actually jump into making, let's do times 5. Well, let's do times 6. That way we're seeing some multiples of 6. Check out our index. This index, the first item its index is 0, was 0 times 6 is still 0. How do we get to 36? What is 36's index? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we take 6 times 6, we get 36. I hope you're seeing what index really means. What does current do? Current, I think it bases it off an index. Let's see what we got. Must return the current, the number of the current item in the series from 0 to max. You can return a negative number to select nothing. So if we don't want to see anything, if we want all of the background, let me do like a negative 1. Notice everything's going to be gray because that is our background color. All right. But for now, how many items do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's what count does. If I bump this up to 11, it's going to add another multiple of 6, as you can see right there. And that's what I need to get 0 to 100. I need 11 items. And I'm going to come back in here and do times 10. because now we should see 0 through 100 because that is going to be 11 items. Now, if we want all of them to be illuminated, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to color, foreground, I'm going to leave it at white. Let me go back to series, and let's bump this up to the max. The maximum number is 11 because we have 11 items whose indexes are 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. This is index 10, and notice 10 times 10 gives us a 100. Let's go to style. Let's change this to circular, and let's get some spacing going on. And I'm going to bump the size up a little bit. And let me bump the spacing down a touch. Okay, there we go. Now, we're going to start off with battery. My battery is at 66. In a minute, later on, I'm going to have it so zeros down here and 100s down here, but we're going to build up to that. So, I'm going to show you a couple of things. First of all, let's put a circle around this thing. And to do that, I need to put everything inside of an overlap group. So I'm going to cut. I'm going to paste. And let's add a circle. Of course, you don't have to do this, but I'm going to make it so we can see this stuff, especially as we start changing things or whatever. Bump its size on up to about 700, I guess, 720 if we want. 700 is plenty good. I'm going to make this a red. Of course, if you'd like, you can apply some type of gradient to it. I'll do a radial, and I'll make it something that kind of fades into a lighter red. There we go. Now, obviously, we lost our numbers. All we have to do there is change the order of these two things. So series is now in front of circle, or it's lower in our list, however you want to view that. Now, let's add a needle. Do I want to put like a little arc thing? Yeah, let me talk about that too. Let's add another shape. Let's do a circle slice. Whoops, not that one. Let's do the one I just added. So we're adding a circle slice here. What color do I want it to be? How about blue? Or you can do some type of progress bar or something like that to show like green for high and red for low for battery. But I'm just going to roll with this for right now. All right, width, how far out do we want it to go? Let's make it come on out here somewhat close to our numbers. And that's plenty good. Now, if we adjust the angle of this thing, that's what's actually going to do something like that, as you can see. Now, I want it to be there. Now, before I do this, notice the 0 is crooked. How can we fix that? If we go back to series and we go to style and we do instead of fixed spacing, if we do fixed size, watch this 0 get nice and centered when I do fixed size. Now, I obviously need to bump its size up some more, but see how that 0 is nice and centered, whereas it was kind of crooked a moment ago? But there we go. Now, I want this edge of the little circle slice to be right in the center of 100. Two ways to do that. One, you can just manually adjust it to your liking. Me, I'm a math guy, so I like the math to take care of all that dirty work for me, and here's how we can do that. Notice how many gaps we have between each number. We got 1 gap, 2 gaps, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I want to cut out one of those 11 gaps. For right now, let me come in here to this code, and let's take 360 degrees and let's divide it by 11. Think of this as a gap. Do you see how that blue right there is actually pretty much right in the center of 10 and right in the center of 0? Well, I want this thing obviously to go around more than that, but I want to cut exactly that much out, and I want to cut it out between 0 and 100. Don't worry, in a minute we're going to rotate the whole thing to where we have 0 down here and 100 down here, but let's build up to that. So I want to cut that out, and I want to cut it out of 360. So all we have to do is take 360 and subtract that gap that we've created. So notice I'm putting 360 in front, and I'm subtracting the gap. So it's cutting out that 32.7 degrees, which leaves us with this, and now notice this should be how we want it. Centered with 0 is centered with 100. So there's our little arc, but this is not our needle. How do we do our needle? We're going to do our needle similar to a second hand. So what we have to do is go back into this group that we have here. Let's add an overlap group because we want to rotate this overlap group separate to how we rotate everything else when we go to rotate something in a second. So inside of this overlap group, I'm going to add a needle, and I'm just going to use a rectangle. Nothing special here. I can't make it the prettiest, but I can make it work. How about that? All right, what color was something that will stand out? Maybe a bright green. There we go. Let's adjust the padding of this needle. So I'm going to apply some bottom padding. There we go. Looks good to me. And now this thing's going to rotate. And in a minute, once we apply the proper rotation to the overlap group, we do not rotate the needle. Watch what happens if we rotate the needle. I'm still inside of my needle right now. And if I go and rotate this thing, it's going to rotate the needle based on it being in the center. Whoops, I'm in corners. I don't want to do that. Notice it's not rotating it correctly. I want to rotate the overlap group. So we're not messing with the needle. We'll go to none for that. But watch what happens here. If I go to the overlap group that the needle's sitting in and I go to its rotation and I set it to manual, it's rotating the group and the needle has that padding. So this is going to rotate based on the center of that overlap group. As you can see, that needle is moving around. And the more I look at this, the more I do want to change its color, something a little bit darker. But when my battery level is at 66%, so I want my battery level to be somewhere right about there. And I need to code it to do that. Well, remember, I think I did show this to you, this code here. We take current divided by max times the max degrees. Our max degrees is not going to be 360. It's going to be the same thing as that degree that we got with that blue circle slice that we created. And it was roughly, I can't remember, whatever 360, what was it, minus around 32-ish. So around 328-ish is what we want the max degrees to be. Current battery level, we can get that out of KLWP. The max battery level is going to be 100, so I'm going to put 100 in that spot. And if we type this code into that needle or into the overlap group rotation, we should be where we want to be, if that makes sense. So how do we do this? Again, remember we are rotating the overlap group. Notice I'm in my overlap group, which in essence is rotating the items inside of it. And the only item we have inside of this overlap group is our needle. So let's go code this using a little bit of math. And remember the formula I just said a moment ago was we take current. In this case, we're talking about battery. So I'm going to go to my battery level. Notice I don't want the percentage symbol, so I'm going to leave that off. Let's divide it by the max. The max in this case, the maximum the battery can be is 100. So think of this as like this is like 66%, 0.66, 66%, same difference. And we want to multiply it by the max degrees. The max degrees is going to be that same code we just did where we took 360 and we divided it by 11 and then we subtracted 360 from that. And I already have that saved as a favorite because I was messing around with this earlier. How do I get to those? That and max degree. Now, I'm going to put parentheses around this just so you can see how each piece of the math code here is working. Current divided by 100, because that's the max that battery can be. And then we multiply it by the maximum number of degrees that we want it to be. So basically, when my battery level is at 100, 100 divided by 100 times the maximum number of degrees, it's going to put it in that spot. But now notice when I check this and save it, remember how our battery level is 66? Check out where my needle is. And this is going to change based on that code. Now, how do we also fix the piece to where 0's down here and 100's down here so it kind of matches that gauge we saw earlier? And before I do that, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this circle slice and I'm going to not make it quite as big. There we go. But everything's still centered. That's still centered with the 100. This is still centered with the 0. All right. To get the 0 down here and the 100 down here, we need to rotate this entire overlap group that everything sits in. But it's going to still keep this needle in the right spot and everything. So if I go to layer, if we go to rotation and we go to manual, now you can manually do this. Now notice here we're at 0. Here we're at 180 or doggone close to it. Well, I want to go a little bit past 180. And basically what I want to do is I want to take this gap that was roughly 32.7 degrees. I want to split that in half and I want to add that on to 180. So take 32, cut it in half, you get around 16. And if you take 180 plus 16, you get 196. That doesn't look exact because the math isn't working out. You know, I'm doing this manually. Let's let the math do this for us. So we want to take 180 and we want to add on half of that gap that I mentioned earlier. So here's how we can do that. Going into here, applying our math, we take 180 plus the gap. And the gap, oh, okay, well, let's look at this. The gap was 360 divided by 11, but we don't want to do just that, and you'll see why. That's too much, right? Well, we want to do half of that gap. So basically we're taking that 32.7 degrees and we're doing half of it over here, half of it over here. How do we do that? We can just take a 0.5 and multiply it. And now if you're familiar with order of operations, this is, I don't have to put parentheses around anything because it's going to do all this jump. It's going to multiply and divide, and then it's going to add 180. So if I check that, that should be nice and centered. Yes, looks good to me. Going back to the home screen, bam. My battery level is roughly 66 as we just saw a moment ago. So yeah, and once it gets to a max, it's going to come here to that max degree, whereas when my battery's dead, it's going to come down here to that spot. I hope that makes sense. And to show you how the needle can jump around, let's go in here and change a little bit of our code. I still want to leave this overlap group exactly where it is. And I want to come to my needle. And I don't want to rotate the needle, so I need to go back to my overlap group and I want to rotate the overlap group. And now let's do it based on CPU usage. Now CPU in KLWP is given to us in a percentage. So anytime we're given a percentage, we can think of the max being 100 because it's out of 100. Now, if you've monitored your CPU before, you may notice that it does jump above 100, but that'll be okay. I'm going to let it just keep on jumping past it. Most of the time, it stays below 100. So current, instead of doing battery level, let's do CPU. And I'm going to do CPU, the system, and the user. So that 51, pop that in there. Oh, crud, I lost off my whole code. Let me just back out of this. And let me come back in here. So take the battery level away. And CPU, I'm going to use this one right here, but I'm going to use my finger because the pen sometimes wants to hold down on it. I don't know why. So take that, take away the dollar symbol, and that's all I really have to change. The reason why, if we go back and look at the code's going to take the current CPU used divided by the max. And since this was in a percentage, it's going to take like 50% or whatever divided by 100, and then it's going to multiply it by the max degree. So let me check that, and I'll tell you what, to show you that this is going to match up pretty good, let me add a text item. I'm going to pop this to the bottom. And I want this text to show my current CPU. Oops, not that one. I want to use that one because that's the one that I did use. Save it. Back to the home screen. And notice 60% CPU is at 60. 53%, you get the idea, right? 48, perfect. I love it. All right, suppose you do not want this thing to be all the way around. Suppose you want it to be at, you want it to be half a circle, but you still want it to go from 0 to 100. Well, let me show you that. What we're going to have to do here, first of all, is I'm going to go back into my overlap group. I'm going to take that layer and I'm going to knock that rotation back to none. That way I have 0 back up here. Because it's just easier for me to manipulate things. I'm still going to be okay with this one because the battery level, only thing we have to do here, shoot, watch this. Overlap group, let me go to my needle. And all we have to do here, since I want to see my battery or my my CPU, I just want to change my max degree. And I want my max degree, whenever my CPU is at 100%, I want the maximum number of degrees to be 180 degrees. So basically, if I'm at 55%, I'm going to have to rotate. I want it to be here. You're going to see how this all comes together in a second. Now, what we're going to have to change here is we're going to have to come in here, and I want 0 to come up to 100 right here, but yet I'm going to still have to use this series a certain way to where I still have numbers going past it. So let's go to series. And all I'm going to have to do here is bump this up. Now notice as I do this, it's adding more and more numbers in here. I'm going to keep on adding my count until I get to 100. Being right smack in the middle. Now I'll tell you what, we've got to go to our style. Let's take our size. What's going to happen if I bump the size down? Oh, no, I don't want to bump the size down. I want to bump the text size down. All right. Hopefully you can still see that. I want to keep on doing this until 100's right here. So more than likely, I'm guessing if we go on up to about 21. Oh, okay, 20 looks like it does it. 0, nice and centered. 100, nice and centered. Yeah, I like that. I ain't got a problem with that. Now you might say, oh, you don't want to see these other numbers, and you're exactly right. Well, how can we fix that? First of all, how many pieces do we want to see? Now, right now I have 20 items. Well, all I want to see is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I want to see 11 items. Oh no, this, okay, index. Remember, current is based on the index from 0 up to wherever we want. Well, we don't want to be at the max because we're getting ready to show you how to hide them. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So if we change current to 10, the only thing that should be white in this case, my foreground color should be 0 through 100. So let me go to style, or no, color. Let me change the background to completely transparent. And now all we're going to see is 0 through 100. Fantastic. We've already got it fixed. Notice 50% is pointing at, or 51. There's 54. See how it's right there on it? All we have to do now is come in here and edit our shapes. So instead of me having a circle, I want to do a circle slice. And I definitely want this to be, you know, we can do it like that. You don't. Now, a way to make a full slice that has a nice point is to make the height half of what the width is. But I tell you what, I'm happy with that. And let's rotate this around to 180. Now you may be saying, okay, some of our numbers are cut off, but notice they're cut off right there in the middle. I'm going to show you how to fix that in a second too. And then if we come back to our other circle slice, if you want, I mean, you can just delete this thing if you want to. I don't even need any of that code anymore. I tell you what, I'm just going to delete that circle slice. You don't have to have that blue thing there. So let's get rid of that. See you later. Now, how do we get this to where it's nice and, you know, the zeros over here and the 100s over here? Well, what we're going to have to do is take this entire overlap group. Let's go to its layer, and if we rotate this thing exactly, I think 270 degrees, is that going to do what I want? Yep, there we go. Boom. Now, you may notice that even though everything, the needle's pointing at the right number, 53, 71, see how it's pointing right, but you see how the zero's hanging off and the 100's hanging off? Well, what we can do to fix that, now notice the 0 is up a little bit higher than the 100. Now there's not too much we can do about that without compromising how accurate this needle is pointing at the number. But what we can do is we can make our circle slice come here and here a little bit more. But we're going to have to create some more overlap groups. But for now, let's take this circle slice and I'm going to bump the angle up a little bit. And let's just go ahead and bump it on up to about 200. Okay? But here's the thing. We want to rotate. Oh, okay, maybe we don't have to do, yeah, oh, we're good. We don't have to rotate. We don't have to create another overlap group. But now I can rotate that, and basically we want to put, now let's think about what we just did there. I made this thing 200. Remember that? Remember how I made that angle 200? Because I'm trying to show the 100 and the 0 all inside of this circle slice. So 200, well, how many degrees do we have left out of 360? Well, that's going to be 160 degrees. If I put this thing back at 0, so 180 is right there. Well, I don't want to do that. I want to keep on going. Okay, if I bump it up to 360, it's taking it right back to where it started. How do I want to do this? Okay, remember there's 200 here, so there's 160 here. And then I want to take that, and I want to, let me think. How about 10? How about I take 10 off this thing? Well, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, let me bump that up to 9. How about somewhere in there? Basically what I'm doing is, okay, remember how we had 160 degrees left over down here because I let this thing be 200? Well, how far is 160 from 180? That's 20 degrees. Take 20 and cut that in half, you get roughly 10. So it should be right about there somewhere, but it may look like it's a little bit off, but I actually think that's right. It's just that it looks like it's more over here, probably because we had that gap in there. But as you can see there, we do have 0 up to 100. A way we could fine-tune that some more probably without it being a distraction is to probably take this thing and bump it on up to like, let's bump it. I'm going to bump it up to 212. 360 minus 212, we have 148. How far is 148 from 180? 32. Take 32 and cut it in half. We get 16. 360 minus 16. You're probably saying, why am I doing all these numbers in my head? Well, we get roughly 344. And as you can see there, it looks pretty, I mean, that right there looks like it's going at the same angle as that is. That can be a little bit off and misleading, but it's because of the way that 0 is versus that 100. But as you can see here, with a little bit of manipulating and hiding some of our numbers in our series, we can still obtain the same accurate measurement on our gauge. You can come in here and put some borders around here or something like that to fine-tune that as well. And then the only thing I didn't cover here, and to make it not look a lot like those gauges we initially saw, is where we have the 0 vertical instead of it being sideways, and the 10 is straight and the 20 is straight. But what you'd have to do there is come into this overlap group and add each individual number on its own, and then you have to apply the proper padding and all that stuff. But I'll leave that up to you to practice that. I at least wanted to show you the series and how to get the needle to work. Now, if you wanted to make it 150, you would come in here and tweak all these things exactly how I just did it, and just keep in mind of that formula here based on your max degrees, that you can change that. And then, yeah, there you have it. You know, we can come in here. Let me finish the thing off by showing the RAM usage. So if I go into the needle, but I'm in my overlap group, this is where we wouldn't be using 100. We would be using the maximum amount of RAM. The maximum amount of RAM I have on my phone, I don't know, but I'm about to find out. Total memory. Total memory right there. So I'm going to put that spot in there, but obviously we have to come in here and delete the M and the dollar symbol. And then I think the only thing I have to change here is instead of C used, I'm going to do M used. I think that's right. Is that code right? Yeah, used memory, so M used. So that's the current memory used divided by the total, or the maximum amount of memory, times whatever degree I had it set to. My max degree was 180. That way we have that half circle look there. And basically here I'm using 80% of my RAM. The reason why it doesn't match this is because that right there is my CPU, which is completely different than, you know, the RAM that I'm using. And there you have it. That's how you can make, in my case, they're not the prettiest gauges in the world, but nonetheless, we are getting a gauge that will monitor certain pieces, whether it be battery, RAM, or CPU. And yeah, that's it for this video. Hope it helped.